I never thought a zipper could change everything. But that's exactly what happened on a Tuesday night in November, when Thaddeus asked me to zip up his jacket and pulled me closer by the collar. And suddenly, I couldn't remember how to breathe or why I'd spent the last 3 months pretending I didn't feel this way about him. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with the zipper. It starts 3 months earlier, in September, when Thaddeus moved into the apartment across the hall from mine. I was carrying groceries up the stairs, struggling with too many bags because I'm stubborn and refuse to make 2 trips, when I heard this voice behind me say, "Hey, you look like you're about to lose a battle with those oranges." I turned around, and there he was, this guy with dark curly hair falling into his eyes, and this crooked smile that made something flip in my chest, and he was already reaching for one of my bags before I could say no. "I'm Thaddeus," he said, just moving in across the hall. And I managed to say, "I'm Jake, thanks for the save," even though my brain was doing this weird thing where it couldn't decide whether to focus on his smile or the way his voice sounded like warm honey. We walked up the last flight together, and he asked if I'd lived here long, and I told him about 2 years, and he said maybe I could show him around the neighbourhood sometime, and I said sure, yeah, definitely, trying to sound casual like my heart wasn't doing gymnastics. That first month we fell into this easy friendship. He'd knock on my door around 9 at night asking if I wanted to grab food, or I'd see him in the hallway and we'd end up talking for an hour about nothing and everything. He worked as a graphic designer from home, and I was finishing my master's in architecture, so we both kept weird hours. Sometimes I'd be up at 2 in the morning working on a project and I'd hear his door open, and 5 minutes later he'd be at my door with coffee saying he figured I could use this. I started noticing things about him. The way he'd run his hand through his hair when he was thinking. How he'd lean against the doorframe when we talked, completely relaxed, like he had all the time in the world. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at something I said. And I started noticing things about myself too, like how I'd listen for his footsteps in the hallway, or how I'd find excuses to text him, or how I'd spend way too long picking out what shirt to wear if I knew I might see him. I'd dated women before, had a serious girlfriend in undergrad, but something about this felt different. This felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I'd lie in bed at night replaying conversations, analysing every word, every gesture, driving myself crazy trying to figure out if he felt it too, or if I was just projecting my own feelings onto a straight guy who was being friendly. Then October happened. We started spending even more time together. He'd come over to watch movies and we'd end up on my couch, and each time we'd sit a little closer. Our knees would touch, and neither of us would move away. He'd throw his arm across the back of the couch and his fingers would brush my shoulder, and I'd lose track of whatever we were watching. One night we fell asleep like that, and I woke up at 3 in the morning with my head on his shoulder and his head tilted against mine, and I stayed perfectly still for 20 minutes, terrified to move, terrified to break whatever this was. I started testing the waters, carefully. I'd mentioned going to a gay bar downtown with some friends, watching for his reaction. He just said, "Cool, can I come next time?" Like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'd make casual references to finding guys attractive and he'd agree or add his own observations, and I'd spend hours afterward trying to decode what that meant. Was he bi? Was he gay? Was he just really comfortable with himself? Or was I reading into everything because I wanted so badly for this to be something it wasn't? My best friend Maya told me I was being ridiculous. "Just tell him how you feel," she said over coffee one afternoon. "The worst that happens is he says he's not interested and you move on." But I couldn't do it. I couldn't risk losing him entirely. I'd rather have him as a friend than not have him at all. So I kept my feelings locked down tight, even though they were growing stronger every single day. November started cold. The kind of cold that hits you the second you step outside. Thaddeus had mentioned wanting to check out this art installation downtown, and I'd said I'd go with him. The night we went, it was freezing, one of those nights where the wind cuts right through you. The installation was beautiful, these massive light sculptures in an outdoor plaza, and we wandered through them for an hour, our breath visible in the cold air. He kept getting excited about different pieces, grabbing my arm to point things out, and each touch felt electric even through our jackets. We took stupid selfies with the lights, standing close so we'd both fit in the frame, and I could smell his cologne, something woody and warm that I'd started associating with safety and home. At one point we were standing in front of this sculpture that cast blue and purple light across everything, and he turned to look at me and said, "This is really cool, thanks for coming with me," and the way he was looking at me made my heart stop. We grabbed dinner at this small restaurant nearby, sitting across from each other in a corner booth. The conversation flowed like it always did, easy and natural, but there was this undercurrent of something else, this tension I couldn't quite name. He told me about his family, how he'd grown up in Oregon and moved here for a fresh start after a bad breakup. He didn't specify the gender of his ex, and I didn't ask, too afraid of the answer either way. I told him about my thesis project, this community centre I was designing, and he listened with genuine interest, asking questions, offering ideas. He had this way of making me feel like what I said mattered, like I was the only person in the room, even though the restaurant was packed. When the check came, we fought over it like always, and like always we ended up splitting it, and his hand brushed mine when we were sorting out bills, and I swear the touch lingered a second longer than necessary. Walking back to the subway, the temperature had dropped even more. I was shivering despite my jacket, and Thaddeus noticed. "You cold?" he asked, and I shrugged and said I'm fine, which was a lie. He moved closer as we walked, close enough that our shoulders bumped with each step, and I wondered if he could hear how fast my heart was beating. On the subway ride home, it was crowded, and we ended up standing holding the same pole, our hands inches apart. Every time the train jerked, we'd sway into each other, and neither of us moved to create more space. I caught him looking at me once, and when our eyes met, he didn't look away immediately, just held my gaze for a moment that stretched out forever, and I thought, this is it. Something's going to happen. But then the train stopped at our station, and the moment broke. We walked back to our building in comfortable silence. The elevator was broken again, so we took the stairs, and by the time we reached our floor, I was working up the courage to say something, anything, to tell him how I felt. We stopped in the hallway between our doors like we always did, neither of us quite ready to say goodnight. That was fun, he said. We should do stuff like that more often. And I said, yeah, definitely, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. He was standing close, closer than the space required, and he had his hands in his jacket pockets and that crooked smile on his face. I should probably go, I said, even though I didn't want to. Early meeting tomorrow. Yeah, me too, he said, but neither of us moved. We just stood there in the hallway, and I swear something was happening, some kind of shift in the air between us. Then he said, "Hey Jake, can I ask you something?" and my heart jumped into my throat. "Sure," I said. He seemed to hesitate, then said, "Do you ever feel like you're on the verge of something, but you're too scared to take the next step?" His eyes were searching mine, and I felt completely exposed, like he could see right through me. "All the time," I said quietly. "What if you take that step and everything changes?" he asked. "Maybe everything needs to change," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, just looking at each other, and I thought he was going to say something else, but then he just smiled and said "Good night, Jake," and disappeared into his apartment, leaving me standing in the hallway wondering what the hell just happened and what it meant. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying the conversation, analysing every word, every pause, every look. Did he mean what I thought he meant? Was he trying to tell me something? Or was I just seeing what I wanted to see? By morning, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, that I was reading too much into a simple question. The next few days were strange. We still talked, still hung out. But there was this new awareness between us, this unspoken thing hovering in the space we occupied. He'd look at me sometimes, and I'd catch something in his expression that I couldn't quite read. I'd say something, and he'd pause before responding, like he was choosing his words carefully. Friday night, I was in my apartment working on my thesis when I heard a knock. I opened the door, and Thaddeus was standing there in sweatpants and a hoodie, looking comfortable and soft and absolutely devastating. "Want to order pizza and watch something terrible?" he asked, and I said obviously because that's what we did most Friday nights. We ordered from our usual place and settled on my couch with a horror movie that was so bad it was good. We fell into our usual pattern, sitting close, providing commentary, laughing at the ridiculous parts. But tonight felt different. Every time we laughed, our shoulders would shake against each other. His arm was along the back of the couch again, and his fingers kept brushing my shoulder, and each touch sent electricity through me. Halfway through the movie, during a particularly absurd scene, we both cracked up at the same time and turned to look at each other, and suddenly we were just staring at each other, not laughing anymore, and the air felt thick with everything unsaid between us. I should tell him, I thought, right now, just say it. But before I could open my mouth, he turned back to the screen, and the moment passed. When the movie ended, we sat there in the flickering light of the credits, neither of us moving. I could hear him breathing beside me. I could feel the warmth of him. I turned to say something, I don't even know what, and found him already looking at me. "Jake," he said softly, and my name in his voice sounded different somehow, weighted with meaning. "Yeah," I managed to say. He opened his mouth, closed it, seemed to struggle with something. Then he said, "I should probably go. It's late." He stood up and I walked him to the door, both of us moving slowly, reluctantly. At the door he turned back and we were standing close again. Too close. Close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Thanks for tonight," he said. "Always," I replied. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder, his hand warm and solid, and then he was gone, and I was left standing there feeling like something important had almost happened, but I'd missed it somehow. The weekend passed in a blur of texts and brief hallway encounters. Monday I barely saw him. Tuesday I was in my apartment trying to focus on work, but really just thinking about Thaddeus, as usual, when I heard his knock. I opened the door and he was standing there in jeans and an unzipped jacket over a t-shirt, and he looked nervous, which was unusual for him. "Hey," he said, "want to take a walk?" It was 8 at night and cold outside, but I said sure, grabbed my jacket. We headed out into the November night, our breath fogging in the air. We walked without talking at first, just moving through the quiet streets of our neighbourhood. Finally he said, "I've been thinking about what I said the other night, about being on the verge of something." "Me too," I admitted. He glanced at me, his expression serious. "I wasn't talking about something abstract, Jake," he said quietly. "I was talking about us." My heart stopped. I literally felt it stop and then start again, harder. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew what he meant, needed to hear him say it. We'd reached a small park and he led us to a bench. We sat down and he turned to face me. "I mean that for the past 3 months I've been trying to figure out if what I'm feeling is real, or if I'm just lonely, or if I'm reading too much into a friendship. I mean that I think about you constantly. I mean that every time I'm near you, I want to be closer. I mean that I am pretty sure I'm falling for you and it's terrifying because I don't want to mess this up." The words hung in the cold air between us, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel this overwhelming rush of relief and joy and fear all mixed together. I stared at him, this beautiful man who'd somehow become the centre of my world in just 3 months, and I said, "You're not reading too much into anything. I've been feeling the same way. I didn't know if you were interested in guys, didn't know if you felt it too, and I've been driving myself crazy trying to figure it out." He laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I'm very interested in guys," he said. "Specifically one guy who lives across the hall from me and makes terrible jokes and stays up too late working on projects, and looks at me sometimes like I'm the only person in the world." I felt my face heat despite the cold. "That's how you look at me," I said softly. We sat there on that bench in the cold November night and talked for an hour. Really talked, laying everything out. He told me about his ex-boyfriend, about moving here to start over, about seeing me that first day and thinking I was attractive but not wanting to assume anything. I told him about my confusion, about realizing my feelings, about being terrified to risk our friendship. We laughed at how we'd both been dancing around this for months, both too scared to make the first move. Eventually the cold became too much and we started walking back. The whole walk I was acutely aware of how close he was, how easy it would be to reach over and take his hand, but I didn't quite have the courage yet. We rode the elevator up in silence, a different kind of silence than before, charged with possibility. In the hallway between our doors we stopped. "This is becoming our spot," he said with a smile. "I like our spot," I replied. We stood there and I knew something needed to happen. Some kind of bridge needed to be crossed, but I still didn't know how to cross it. Then Thaddeus said, "Hey Jake, can you help me with something?" "Sure," I said. He gestured to his jacket, still unzipped. "I can never get this zipper started, it always sticks at the bottom. Can you zip it up for me?" It was such a simple request, almost absurd given everything we'd just talked about, but I stepped closer and reached for the zipper. My hands were shaking slightly as I grasped the 2 sides of his jacket, pulling them together at the bottom. I could feel the warmth of him through the fabric. I got the zipper started and began pulling it up slowly, hyper-aware of every inch, of how close we were standing, of how he was watching my face as I focused on this simple task. When I got the zipper about halfway up, his hand came up and caught mine, stopping me. I looked up and found his eyes locked on mine, dark and intense. Then his other hand came up and grasped my collar, his fingers curling into the fabric, and he pulled me closer, so close I could feel his breath on my face. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Is this okay?" he whispered, and I managed to nod, managed to whisper back, "Yes, more than okay." His hand tightened on my collar, and he pulled me that last inch closer and kissed me, soft and careful at first, like he was afraid I might disappear. I kissed him back, my hands still tangled in his half-zipped jacket, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened, becoming less careful, more certain. We stood there in that hallway, kissing like we'd been waiting our whole lives for this moment, which maybe we had. His hand moved from my collar to cup the back of my neck, his fingers threading through my hair, and I made a sound I'd probably be embarrassed about later, but couldn't bring myself to care about now. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, and he was smiling that crooked smile that had started all of this. "So," he said breathlessly, "that happened?" "That definitely happened," I agreed, my hand still gripping his jacket. "Should we talk about this?" he asked. "Probably," I said, "but I don't want to stop kissing you yet." "Good answer," he murmured, and kissed me again. We eventually made it into my apartment, though I'm not entirely sure how. We ended up on my couch, properly this time, facing each other, holding hands like teenagers, talking and kissing and talking some more. He told me he had wanted to kiss me for weeks. I told him about all the nights I'd lain awake thinking about him. We made plans for a real date, dinner and a movie where we could actually hold hands and be openly together. It's after 2 a.m. when he finally said he should probably go, though neither of us moved. I walked him to the door and we kissed again. Slower this time, sweeter, like we had all the time in the world now. At the door he turned back and said, "So we're doing this. We're really doing this." "We're really doing this," I confirmed, and the smile he gave me could have lit up the entire city. That was 2 months ago. Now it's January and Thaddeus is asleep on my couch, his head in my lap while I work on my laptop. We've fallen into new patterns, better patterns. We still have movie nights, but now I can kiss him during the boring parts. We still talk in the hallway, but now those conversations end with goodnight kisses. He still brings me coffee at 2 a.m, but now he stays, curling up beside me while I work. We've told our friends and families, navigated the usual questions and adjustments. My parents were surprised but supportive. His parents had apparently suspected for years that he'd end up with a guy. Maya took full credit for the relationship, claiming her advice helped even though I never actually followed it. We haven't talked about the future much, about what happens when I finish my thesis or whether one of us will move into the other's apartment or any of the big questions. We're taking it slow, enjoying each discovery, each new level of intimacy. But I think about it sometimes, about a future where I wake up next to him every morning, where his space and my space become our space, where we build something real and lasting. He stirs in his sleep, and I run my hand through his curly hair, the same hair that fell into his eyes that first day when he saved me from losing my oranges. He mumbles something unintelligible and settles deeper into sleep, and I feel this overwhelming surge of affection, of gratitude, of love. I never expected this. Never expected that helping someone with a stuck zipper would lead to this. To him, to us. Never expected that a Tuesday night in November would change everything. But I'm learning that the best things in life are usually unexpected, that sometimes you have to be brave enough to take that step, even when you're terrified, that sometimes the person you're looking for has been right across the hall all along. I finish up my work and carefully close my laptop, trying not to wake him. I'm tired too, and my couch is big enough for both of us. I shift down and he automatically adjusts, curling into me, his arm coming around my waist. I pull the blanket over both of us and close my eyes, breathing in the scent of his cologne, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Tomorrow we'll wake up tangled together and he'll make his terrible coffee that I pretend to like, and we'll figure out what to do with our Saturday. Maybe we'll stay in and be lazy. Maybe we'll brave the January cold and explore the city. Maybe we'll just exist in that space between our doors that started all of this. But right now, in this moment, with Thaddeus warm and solid against me, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, all because of a zipper, a collar, and the courage to pull each other closer.